Do you have a daughter that you're trying hard to bond or connect with, but are struggling? Today in this episode, you're going to get an inside access look into the relationship between a real father and daughter and what makes and keeps them close and how you can have the same relationship with your daughter. If you're ready to be inspired and ready to make some changes, help is on the way in just a moment, so don't go anywhere.
Welcome to the Fatherhood Challenge, a movement to awaken and inspire fathers everywhere to take great pride in their role and to challenge society to understand how important fathers are to the stability and culture of their family's environment. Now, here's your host, Jonathan Guerrero.
Greetings, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me. My guest is Reena Friedman Watts with her dad and co-host of the Better Call Daddy podcast and show, Wayne Friedman. Reena and Wayne, thank you so much for being on the Fatherhood Challenge.
Thank you for having us.
We're excited to be here. Wow, I love that radio voice.
Let's start out with my favorite question of all. What is your favorite dad joke? And this is to both of you.
When I think of dad joke, I think my dad loves to say, you know what your problem is? You like me.
Or your father's mustache.
Your father's mustache. Yeah, at the end of every reaction that we do, my dad continues to surprise me with his reactions, by the way. Like, sometimes I don't know what he's going to think about the guests that I've interviewed. And he's always like, when I have a good reaction to his reaction, he's like, you know what your problem is? You like me. I'm like, yeah, I do. And then I put that in my intro even because we say it so much to each other.
It is a true story. I've listened to a few episodes and that's exactly what happens. He does. Wayne definitely says that. Well, Wayne, let's start with you. It's obvious you and Reena have a bond. You can't co-host a program or a podcast with your daughter without that strong bond. So where did that begin?
Well, I think I've tried very hard to have a bond with all three of my girls. And you have to find what interests them and you have to be part of their show. In the beginning, you would think that a father, whether he has sons or daughters, wants your children to be part of your show or my show. But it turns out that trying to force or trying to put your values onto theirs, they have to accept it on their own. It's got to be their choice. And if it isn't their choice, it's really not going to work. Because eventually, when someone is telling you what to do, or telling you how to feel, or instructing you of what you can do and what you can't do, eventually, a person is going to revolt and say, I've had enough of that spaghetti and meatballs. I want to try something else. And I think a parent has to try to set some guidelines, but you have to be able to give your children an opportunity to stand on their own 2 feet and be able to blossom and be their own person. And the best way to do that is to have communication that's not just one-sided. It's got to be where it's reciprocal, where they have a voice that is going to be heard. And if you can't get it from your father and your mother, where are you going to get it from? And if you get it from other places, it's sometimes a very tough learning experience. It's a lot nicer if you can get it at home.
That's interesting. So if we go a little deeper into that, and if I'm understanding you correctly, what you're really doing is you are modeling those values, but in the world of your daughters.
That's correct.
Reena, you've referred to your dad as your best friend, whom you can share anything with. What are your earliest memories of your dad that have made you feel close to him?
I was thinking about this question, and one of the earliest memories I have is decorating my dad and our dogs with stickers and jewelry, and he was always willing to kind of like play along to my shenanigans. And that progressed as I grew older. I was putting on like musical performances and he would sit on the couch and clap his hands. And then, when my grandparents were in a nursing home, he encouraged me to go sing for them and sing for the residents. And
Wow.
I think that goes along with what he was saying. encourage your kids' talents. Each one of us kind of had our own talents. I like to sing, and I had a sister who played the violin and she played baseball, and I had another sister that was very into art and painting, and whatever interests we had, he really got us the lessons and went to our games and cheered on the sidelines and was there with, my parents, my grandparents, and it became a family affair. I mean, as you can imagine, having 3 daughters, there was always us competing for our parents' attention
Hmm.
um and our interests and what we wanted to do versus, what they wanted us to do, but they did make us believe that we could do anything that we set our minds to, and I think that that's really cool. Like, they never said you can't major in vocal music or you can't major in sports medicine or how about physics or how about becoming a doctor. Like, I was pre-med for 2.5 years and then switched my major to communications and broadcasting, and they were really okay with it. They're like, "Okay, if that's what you wanna do with your career," and I did end up doing that for my career, but I was much closer to a bachelor's of science, and I was on a full scholarship at a college, and I ended up transferring from the University of Charleston, where I was doing a little bit of partying, to Purdue, which was a much more serious university, and I left behind a singing scholarship and decided I wanted to try something else, and I didn't really see a lot of resistance there.
You both co host a podcast and show called Better Call Daddy. Where did you come up with the idea of working together, and how was that decision made? How did that decision make you both stronger?
My dad is always who I've called. He's always the one that can stay on the phone for hours at a time and pretty much handle most situations that I've been in. So that has been a common theme through my life. I think I decided that would be a good idea for a show after I worked for a top podcaster. I worked for Kathy Heller, host of Don't Keep Your Day Job, and I was like 7 months pregnant helping her produce a 350-person event. And this was also after I had co-hosted the Next Level People show. So I had kind of already worked in radio, co-hosted another podcast, then worked for a top podcaster. And my dad was in LA on business meeting a colleague. And I was 7 months pregnant, putting out tables for sponsors and, you know, keeping the guests happy in the green room. And he was like, I will help you put out the tables. I will help you set up the booths. I will make sure this event runs smoothly. Like, he was worried about me moving chairs. He was like my production assistant for the day. I've been behind the scenes, kind of got my start in television at the Jerry Springer Show right out of college, and, worked in reality TV for a while, and then, like I said, worked for a bunch of influencers, and I felt like during the pandemic, it was kind of my opportunity to step in front of the camera and use all of these skills that I had learned for all of these years, and I knew my dad wouldn't back out on me, that he would be the best co-host, and that he really synthesizes my thoughts well, and he's there for me, and I thought that his wisdom and his intergenerational flair would make a good show.
Everything I'm hearing from what you're saying is comes back to the earlier question of your dad actually modeling this idea of being in your world, of helping you thrive in your world and helping you grow.
And his parents modeled that too. He worked with his parents for 40 plus years and he learned every aspect of the business. And that's something that my grandfather encouraged. He said, if you want to have your own business, then you need to learn all of the departments, not just how to manage people, but how to do the work that you're asking the people to do. And so my dad worked alongside his parents, saw them model that. And, it wasn't just working together in the factory. It was once he came home too, they learned how to invest in the stock market together. We had a close-knit family where we got together on weekends. I mean, I spent the night at my grandparents' house until I was about in 5th grade. They had like a special mattress for me in their own room. I remember my grandmother on the typewriter doing the time cards, and my grandfather always had the news on. And I grew up with my grandparents like a 5-minute drive away. And whenever I called them, my grandfather was like, be right there, little girl. So my grandparents were a big part of my life. Like I grew up in Kentucky. So people get married young and My grandparents were like second parents to me.
Everything I just heard you say, I think, can be summed up in one word. And this is what I see happening in the dynamics between you and your dad. And that word is legacy. There's a legacy generations deep that's being left. And I think that's absolutely amazing.
Yeah, thank you. I
We
agree.
appreciate that because that's what the Better Call Daddy podcast is about, is really sharing not only our legacy, but asking people to investigate the legacy of their own families and with their own experiences. So that really coincides with what the theme of the show is about.
So let's dive into the spiritual dynamics. What dynamics of your father-daughter relationship mimic the image of God? And how does that relate to all of us?
Isn't it true that, at least in our family and with the religious background that we have, we're obligated to really pass to the next generation everything that we've learned and values. We're supposed to be able to pass down the belief of God, do the right things, and to be spiritual, and to be educated and grow your whole life. That's a legacy that we feel is very close to God. And the fact is that we just don't live forever. And the only way that we can have a chance of living forever is if we pass on through the generations our knowledge and our wisdom, and pass that along. And hopefully, if you're successful in business a little bit, we can give a tool of passing on and some inheritance financially as well. But it doesn't take much to blow the money. So we've got to make sure that we pass down good values, as I mentioned already earlier, that your children and your grandchildren, your great grandchildren, want to learn and grow and have values of caring about others and not just yourself, and try to make humanity a goal, not just individual goals.
I love that. It's funny too, because he always says, have a couple kids of your own. You'll see how easy it is.
It's a big job. And the funny part is that it only took a second to make Reena, but the fact is that it's a lifelong commitment. It's a lifelong, I don't know how to say it. I guess it's really where you have to set the right example for your children always. They don't necessarily follow what you say. They follow more your actions of what you do. So you really have to set a good example hands-on your whole life, because your children are watching you at all different ages of their development, are following what your lead is. And I think we have a responsibility to do the best that we can to set the best example. And like I said, it's got to be done to where an individual has to understand that part of our existence is to be able to give your children every opportunity to have a continuum. And without that, I think our individual lives would be more shallow.
There's something really profound that you're bringing up, and that is the fact that we have a spiritual responsibility and accountability as fathers for our children, for the legacy that we leave our children. We are accountable. We are responsible for that. That's what it means. That's this whole idea of mimicking the image of God, which is the way he set it up. This is the way it was designed to be. And if I really dive into the emotional component of it, to me, that's overwhelming. That actually, I would probably just go ahead and say, it's a scary thought to me when I look at it that way. Does it ever feel overwhelming to you?
Oh, it certainly can be. And sometimes when you even think you've done a terrific job, it can all blow up in your face, because events can occur out there in the real world that can give you a major setback. And the fact is that we have to learn to pivot. We have to learn to understand that it's not the end of the world, and we just have to find maybe a new path or a new way of moving forward. But we can't allow the pitfalls to stop everything that we're trying to build.
Well, the good news is we don't have to do it alone. God has promised to help us. If He's given us a responsibility that great, He doesn't typically give responsibilities like that without access to help and resources from Him to accomplish that.
I agree with you 100%.
Wayne and Reena, I've been told by experts that eye contact is essential to a bond and connection with your daughter. Is this true? And what's your experience with this?
Oh, absolutely. The funny part is that I can tell when I'm looking at Reena whether she really hears me or if I have surprised her with an answer. It shows up on her face, just like she's written a book to me. So I think that expression or facial expressions, as long going with the eyes as well. I think you can get a good read. You can sometimes really know if somebody's got something in their hand by the way they're acting. That's why a lot of times they have a hat on or a hood and dark glasses, because they don't want to give away the emotion of their hand at all, where they're trying to just be a blank. Because I do agree that our bodies give us a lot of communication of how we really feel, where it's very hard to fake that. So I agree with you that eye contact, facial contact, whether a person is you don't have them see you sweat, okay, or be extra nervous, because, like I said, when it comes to being in the clutch, you want someone that can step up to a higher level when you're competing, when the pressure is on, not someone who's going to melt.
I think I have your eyeballs. My face says it all.
Right. It's like I said, she can be communicating just by her reaction to things. And sometimes I have to spend a little extra time calming her down, even when she has said nothing. Okay. Just from the facial expressions.
And I think a mother has that instinct even with her own children. I mean, even in the way that she's able to pick up baby cries. That's what I was thinking is, you can tell when they're hungry, you can tell when they're hurt, you can tell when they're sick. So I think a lot of it is instinctual. And another thing that I wanted to say too was my relationship with my dad and even my grandparents has led to a belief in God, because my dad always told me as a young kid that as long as he's alive, nothing bad will ever happen to me. And I think, when I'm having a hard time, I even am like, if you love me like my dad loves me, then help me out right now. Like, I know he puts up with a lot, like I talk to God like that because of my relationship with my dad. I feel like I'm able to believe in God and in the hardest times.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's powerful. And I think that's another form of a legacy that's being left. I would
hope
argue
so.
maybe that's the most important one. Now, they're all very, very important, but that's the most important legacy, because that's what was really designed all the way from the very, very beginning. The very first book in scripture is about that. If that's being achieved, that speaks to a huge success. That's a big win. As a parent, you touched on a different dynamic, and that is the mother-daughter relationship. The very same thing happens there.
Yeah. I think that it's important to be able to talk to both of your parents to feel understood. And even in what we're trying to achieve with our show, and I think what you're trying to achieve with yours as well, is by hearing people's stories and by giving them time and not rushing through that, and making people feel like their story matters or that their experience matters or that they can help someone. That literally can save people's lives. That literally can give people legacy and purpose. It's truly unbelievable what listening to someone tell their story can do. My dad even encouraged me to put ear pods on his 93-year-old mother and have her tell me stories of where she came from so that I could get that before she wasn't able to tell that story anymore. And now I'm so glad that I did that.
Oh,
And he
wow.
found a recording of his dad when he was clearing out the factory that they used to work at together. It was like a cassette recording of he was getting ready to fire an employee, and the other employee who had referred him to the company was like, "I'm sorry I referred that guy. Like, he was making me look bad." And he was like, "Well, thank you for letting me know that." But I think my grandfather was like hitting record just to document what he was getting ready to do. And I had that cassette transferred to an MP3, and I did an episode where I interviewed my grandmother and then did a little transition explaining that I had found this tape, and so I had my grandfather in the same episode and his philosophy on work. And then my dad responded to the episode. So it was like a triple generation episode, me,
Oh,
my grandparents,
wow.
and my dad. And that too is like the power of storytelling, the power of legacy, and the power of documenting for the next generation.
I think even your daughter was part of that show. I think it was 4 generations.
Yeah, my kids have participated even in the podcast through creating intros, asking some of the guests that I've interviewed questions, coming up with different commercials with me. I think that if you have skills that you can pass on to your kids, chances are they have some of those talents and they might even not know that they have those talents. So if there's something that you're good at, I'm even trying to tell my dad, teach my kids how to invest. You know, teach my kids how to take care of the yard, teach my kids how to take care of their grandparents. I think them seeing me wanting to go see my 95-year-old grandma, even though it's their spring break, but how many years do I have left with her? I think that teaches them lessons just in going to visit.
Remember, your actions sometimes speak louder than words.
Yeah. I saw a news article that they opened like a childcare center in a nursing home. They are testing that model because old people love babies and kids love old people. And there is, I feel like that it's missing from society today. Like kids live away from their parents and parents live away from their parents. I mean, my dad flies to Florida like once a month to go help out with his mom. And we're all so spread out. And like I said earlier in the episode, I grew up with both sets of my grandparents within a 5-10 minute drive away. And they were coming to all of my performances or all of my school events and Grandparents' Day. Now, Grandparents' Day is like a parent coming or an aunt coming or a friend coming from the community. And that's great too. It's just there is wisdom from those other generations, and I think we still need to kind of incorporate some of that for learning.
I want to move on to a different direction. Why is it essential for dads to drop their anger immediately and always when they interact with their daughters?
The truth of the matter is that if you want your daughter to have a relationship with a man down the road, you have to give even an example of what a man should be like to your daughter. So you have to treat her right first. You have to be understanding first. You have to be easy with your tone first. Because if you don't do that, what can happen is that they will meet someone out there. And if you're yelling at your daughter, or if you're overdoing it, or if you're being holding them back, or telling them what to do, and they can't do this, and they can't do that, well, guess what? Then they're going to use that example and say, well, I love my dad, and my dad was like that. Maybe I've got to find somebody that's like my dad, but not necessarily in a good way, but in a bad way. And then that's how girls can end up in an abusive relationship because they think that that's normal. So I think it's very important, especially with a daughter, that a father has to be extra patient and understanding and set the best possible example. You want to be a little rough with your son, you want him to be a little tougher. But with a daughter, you got to treat her like she's a piece of pie with whipped cream and a cherry on top.
Love that answer. Reena, what are your thoughts on this?
I think that, I mean, my parents got married super young. And to be honest, my dad was very passionate in his younger years with expressing himself. And even if there was some yelling, I think it's really important just to tuck your kids in at night and let them know that you love them, and to drive them to school in the morning and ask them what's on their mind. And if they want to talk for an hour or two at a time, do that. And if there are things that you can't talk about, like, I went to a grandparent. So that's what comes to mind for me is there are going to be times where you guys don't see eye to eye, or that you're not going to be as close. I mean, even when I was in college, I was definitely figuring out myself and wanted some years to do that. But just let your daughter know that kind of like what you stand for and what your values are, and that you're going to be there and you're going to be accepting, and that you can call at any hour.
How can dads listening connect with you both with any questions, or to learn more about what you're doing, or to just listen into your podcast?
BetterCallDaddy.com. And we love when people have questions for us. That's something that we do at the end of every episode. We say, is there anything that you would like to ask my dad? And it can be around business. It can be around a personal struggle that you're having. People have even said that they want to adopt my dad, and that is the biggest form of flattery.
As we close, what is your challenge to dads listening now?
Dads should express to their daughters what they're proud of them about. I don't think that dads do it enough. Maybe they just don't think to, and I think it's really powerful to do that. Let your kids know that what they've done is good, and that you see that in them. I think letting your kids know that you see their gifts stays with them for a really long time. It's something that they can always draw from.
A dad really has to be able to step up and be able to show that they're going to be there for their daughter no matter what. But I feel the same thing about a son too. You've got to be there unconditionally. And sometimes it's hard, because if they're doing certain things that are against the grain that you don't believe in, but you have to try to put your, fit the shoe, how the shoe fits on the other foot, and try to see where they're coming from, despite your own beliefs. But it's hard. Sometimes it's really hard. But you have to be willing to at least try to find some middle road if you can.
Wayne, Reena, it has been a pleasure having you both on the Fatherhood Challenge. You've given us so much wisdom, much needed wisdom. I've been looking forward to doing this episode for a long time, because I knew it was going to be packed with so much wisdom, and that was certainly true today. Thank you so much for being on the Fatherhood Challenge.
Thanks for having us again. We appreciate
Thanks,
it.
Jonathan. Loved your questions.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Fatherhood Challenge. If you would like to contact us, listen to other episodes, find any resource mentioned in this program, or find out more information about the Fatherhood Challenge, please visit thefatherhoodchallenge.com. That's thefatherhoodchallenge.com.
I'd like to pause and thank our proud sponsor of the Fatherhood Challenge, Zencastr. If you've thought about podcasting before and realized that you need a lot of different tools and services, those days are over. With Zencastr's all-in-one podcast production platform, you can create your podcast all in one place and distribute to Spotify, Apple, and other major destinations. But the reason I personally use and trust them with the production of this syndicated radio program is their professional broadcast quality sound. There is no better time than now to start your podcast using Zencastr for all your needs. Go to zencastr.com/pricing and use my code FATHERHOOD, and you'll get 30% off your first month of any Zencastr paid plan. I want you to have the same easy experiences I do for all my podcasting and content needs. It's time to share your story.